And then in 1982, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial opened. And that really, that did something to me. It triggered something in this little box that I had in the back of my head. It opened up. And I started to have nightmares. I started to have flashbacks. One day I was working as a carpenter, and I was on a construction site, and a pallet of plywood broke loose from the forklift, and it hit the ground with a tremendous explosion, and I hit the deck, and I was crawling. And for that moment, I was not in Virginia, I was back in Vietnam. And I thought, boy, I'm in trouble here. And so I went and I sought help. And at that point, they had an organization called COVER, Community Outreach for Vietnam-era Returnees. And it was funded by Veterans Affairs, and it was peer counseling. It was talking to people who had been to Vietnam. I'm not talking to someone with a PhD in counseling, talking to someone who actually knew what I was going through. And I was in counseling probably off and on for 4 or 5, 6 years. And gradually learned that you're never going to forget about it. But the trick is not to let it overtake your life. And I was going along. Things were pretty good. I should mention that at the same time I was going through what was called PTSD, and at the time I didn't even know what PTSD was. It was a term that was started back in the early 80s, and I didn't know what the heck was going on with me. But come to find out, I was struggling from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so one of the ways I was coping with it was self-anesthetizing through drugs and alcohol. And in 1988, I went into alcohol rehab and realized that the two were tied together, that the one was feeding off the other, and I was never going to be really well until I, cleaned up my act. And I did, and I've been clean and sober now for 28 years. And at the same time, I've sort of put, the demons from Vietnam behind me. And so life went on, and then in the early 90s, we went into Iraq. We had Desert Storm, we had Desert Shield, and then a little later on, 9/11 came on, and we had Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and at one point we went into Somalia. Boy, men and women were coming back from all these places, and they were all suffering from the same thing that I had suffered from. It's like you've seen and done these things, and you don't want to remember them, but you can't forget them. And that's basically what PTSD is. It is now estimated that between Vietnam veterans, Iraq veterans, and Afghanistan veterans, there are over 1 million people walking around suffering from PTSD. And then in 2009, my stepson, who's out there, he hiked the Appalachian Trail. And he sent pictures back, and I thought, that looks kind of interesting. That might be something I'd be interested in doing. And I was working at the time, couldn't do it. And then I retired about a year later, and I started to think more and more about it. And then in 2012, it was the 30th anniversary of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And I was invited, along with close to 2,000 other people, and in a ceremony that lasted for 65 hours, we read every single name on the wall. And going back there in 2012, my outlook was totally different than it had been early on. Early on, it was the wounds were so new and so fresh, and the names on the wall were so new and so fresh, and I'd like to think that time is a great healer. Time, putting distance between it really helps. And I talk with veterans now that are struggling, and I like to try and tell them, although it doesn't do them much good if they've just gotten back, that in time things will get better. But at any rate, what I saw was that there were still many Vietnam veterans that they were trapped. They were still back where I had been, back in the 80s. And so I got interested in PTSD, and I started to do research on it, and tried to learn a little bit about it. And then in 2013, I read a book called Walking to Spring by a guy named Earl Schaff, who was the first person to hike the Appalachian Trail. Now, Earl, in 1948, hiked the Appalachian Trail, and when asked why he was doing it, he said he was walking off the war. Now,